Did Jay Johnson just land his 2025 Friday night starter? Tigers stay hot in the portal. We're talking about it. It's Locked on LSU. Let's go.
You are Locked on LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Okay, let's get it. It is Locked on LSU, your team every day. I'm your host, Matt Moscona. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for making us your first listen every single day. We are free, available wherever you get great podcasts, and of course on YouTube as well. So subscribe on your favorite podcast app, rate us, leave a review. If you're there on YouTube, subscribe to the channel, smash that like button. We appreciate you for being with us. We'll get to Jay Johnson staying hot in the portal. A MLB scout gives his take on what LSU has done in the portal so far, and my goodness, wait until you hear what he has to say about Bear Jones and Griffin Herring. That's coming up. And the LSU football transfer portal sleeper that 24/7 Sports says you absolutely have to keep an eye on here in the 2024 football season. We are brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Today's episode brought to you by FanDuel, so make every moment more as the playoffs wind down. The sports stop sporting like we want them to. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. So, right about 3 o'clock Central Time on Wednesday, just as I was beginning my radio show, Jay Johnson puts out his tiger emoji tweet. That's the tweet that he puts out to signify that he got himself a commitment. And a short time later, there was a Twitter account that from 64 Analytics that mentioned waves coming in the SEC with the portal, and we all assumed that that was referring to whatever it was that Jay Johnson tweeted about, only to find out from Kendall Rogers that was actually about a Vanderbilt portal commitment from Michigan State who was deciding to stay in East Lansing, whatever. Well, as the day goes on, it became clear, and on Wednesday evening, we got confirmation that LSU has landed Anthony Eyanson. If you were here over the weekend, we told you about Anthony Eyanson making his visit to LSU. And y'all, this is another small school guy, and some of you are going to roll your eyes. But again, you're going to hear from Joe Doyle here in just a smidge, who will tell you why you shouldn't be rolling your eyes at these LSU commitments. I had to bring in an objective third party to tell you why this class is so impressive. But y'all, Anthony Eyanson, if you need know nothing else, it's this. After Anthony Eyanson visited LSU last weekend, he went to Winston-Salem to visit Wake Forest, went to Gainesville on a visit to Florida, went to Knoxville to visit Tennessee, and then had plans to visit Texas before making his commitment to LSU. Anthony Eyanson is a legit dude. Hear me now. Hear this, please. Anthony Eyanson could very well be LSU's Friday night starter in 2025. In the same way that when you landed Paul Skeens, you anticipated him being part of the weekend rotation, but remember, it was the same portal class where they landed Thatcher Hurd, and we all thought Thatcher Hurd was the guy, and then Skeens became Paul Skeens. A year ago, when they landed Luke Holman and Gage Jump, we knew those two guys were coming here to be front of the rotation guys. I know LSU was returning Chase Shores from injury, that Cade Anderson's coming back for his senior year, and that you've signed 5 pitchers so far in this portal class that have been weekend starters at their respective schools. But maybe none has the ceiling of Anthony Eyanson. I could say Devin Sheeran from Mount St. Mary's could certainly be in the mix. But make no mistake, Anthony Eyanson is a dude. He's from California. He's played the last 2 years at UCSD. That's University of California, San Diego. And you, again, can roll your eyes about the small school thing, but I'll tell you again. Paul Skeens was at Air Force. Eric Razelman was at the University of San Francisco. Paul Gervais was a JUCO guy. The bottom line is a lot of guys grow up physically after they turn 17, 18 years old, or after the recruiting process. They get to a college campus, come into their body, and then they start looking like dudes, and that's what happened with Anthony Eyanson. 6'2", 195 pounds. Y'all, you can't fake this. 95 to 97 from the right side. A slider at 83. I talked to a big league scout from an NL team today who looked up the NL team scouting report on Anthony Eyanson, and he was blown away. What he said about Anthony Eyanson's slider is, he said, the slider is real. Curveball 77 to 79, a three-pitch mix. He was invited to try out this week for Team USA's collegiate national team. You don't get invited to try out for Team USA's collegiate national team if you're not a dude. Anthony Eyanson is a dude. By the way, he's projected a top 100 prospect, a top 3-round guy for the 2025 draft. And oh, by the way, you come to LSU, you shove in the weekend for a year, that number goes up, up, up. Now, let's look at what LSU has vying for that rotation. Chase Shores throws 100 coming off of Tommy John, and that's the big question. In the same way that Gage Jump was coming off of Tommy John, and you look at Thatcher Hurd coming off a back injury, there's always that question with guys coming off an injury. How soon will they revert to form? That's a real question with Chase Shores. The good news for Chase Shores is, as I was told, he was physically ready and able to pitch by the end of this past season, but they didn't want to rush him. So you give him innings this summer, you give him innings in fall ball, you ramp him up in preseason and pre-conference next year, he should be good to go by the time you get to conference play. Like, let it loose by the time you get to conference play. Cade Anderson was awesome as a freshman in the midweek, struggled to get SEC hitters out, but by the end of the season, especially in the SEC tournament and regional play, Cade Anderson looked the part of a weekend guy. We will hold our breath on Griffin Herring, and I got to get to what Joe Doyle had to say here in just a bit. But now you add Anthony Eyanson, Friday night guy. This past year, a 3.07 ERA, 85 strikeouts in 82 innings pitched, and the command is real as well. Just 24 walks in those 82 innings pitched. By the way, as a freshman at UCSD, Anthony Eyanson, 29 innings pitched, just 8 walks. So you're talking about a walk every 4 innings in his career is about what he's averaging, and more than a strikeout per inning. Again, the stuff is very real. Eyanson will be vying for the Friday night job. I'm not telling you he's going to win it, but he will be in that conversation. Jacob Myers from Nichols, strikeout artist. Can he get command? We'll see, but he's been a weekend guy. Zach Cohen from Wofford, Friday night guy from Wofford. Maybe a weekend rotation guy, maybe a weekend inning eater as a middle relief guy. Luke Hayden from Indiana State, he was their number 2. He's coming with an eye on trying to work his way into the weekend. And then Devin Sheeran, 100 from the right side, might have the highest ceiling of any of these prospects and is going to have to earn his way into this weekend rotation. We're not talking about potential. We're not talking about high school prospects with a high upside. We are talking about dudes that have already been college pitchers, Friday, Saturday guys on their staff, looking for their springboard opportunity through the SEC to do exactly what guys like Skeens and Gervais and Raiselman did before them, which is go into the SEC, prove your stuff plays and you can get SEC hitters out, and then go make a boatload of money and head off to the big leagues. And all that is going to be LSU's benefit, because Jay Johnson and his staff have done an incredible job putting this transfer portal class together and rebuilding this roster into something that should look like an Omaha team come next June. Okay, so Anthony Eyanson becomes the 7th pitching commit for LSU. I of course, mentioned 6 right there. You've also got Chandler Dorsey from South Florida, but he's a closer. He's a back of the bullpen guy that you expect steps in day one and is your closer in 2025. So now that LSU's put this transfer portal class together, Joe Doyle does an amazing job. If you don't follow him on Twitter, you should. But Joe Doyle, had a chance to talk to Joe Doyle on Wednesday on my radio show. And not only did I talk to him about this LSU transfer portal class, talk to him about Daniel Dickinson, the infielder from Utah Valley that LSU got committed 2 days ago. And then also we talked about Bear Jones and Griffin Herring. And I think you are going to be very interested into what Joe Doyle has to say about those two current Tigers and what may happen in this weekend's draft. We have got a ton to do. Don't you move. It is Locked on LSU, your team every day. I love sports. I love sports so much that I never want them to end. I'm pretty excited because Sunday I'm heading to Dallas for SEC Football Media Day starting on Monday. Monday in Dallas, Arlington. Home Run Derby, Tuesday All-Star Game. I'll be right around the corner. Might find a way over there. But if you want to bet on it, the best place to go is FanDuel. FanDuel lets all of us just keep on sporting whenever we want all summer long. All you got to do is open the app, dream up bets anytime that you're in the mood. From Major League Baseball to Wimbledon, the Olympics are coming up. It's all there for you this summer. FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com, FanDuel.com, and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. That's FanDuel.com. Okay. Anthony Eyanson joins a really, really impressive LSU transfer portal class. Had a chance to talk to Joe Doyle on my radio show on Wednesday. And if you're not familiar, I host After Further Review on ESPN Radio in Baton Rouge, New Orleans, Alexandria, Lake Charles, Lafayette. So really all over the state of Louisiana. And love it if you join us every single weekday there. But I talked to Joe Doyle, who's a senior analyst over at Future Star Series. He consults MLB teams. He's a scout and does an awesome job. If you are not following him on Twitter, you should. It's at Joe Doyle, MILB. First of all, and I want to get into the player components here of what Joe Doyle had to say in just a second. But I want to start by addressing you, the fan. And not all of you, but there's some of you who know who you are. And it's that segment of the LSU fan base that's looked at this transfer portal class and said, my goodness, they just keep getting all these small school guys. Sure, the numbers look good, but who have they done it against? Okay. So I said, let me ask a guy that's seen all of these people play, who spends every day of his life at a ballpark watching, scouting baseball. I proposed that question to Joe Doyle. What do you say to the fan that says, yeah, but who have they done it against? Take it away, Joe Doyle.
My answer would be, show me a 6'5" guy that's throwing 98 miles an hour with an 88 mile an hour slider. I don't care if he's doing it in Spain. I don't care if he's doing it on a remote island. That's going to play in the SEC. As long as those dudes are throwing strikes, there are pro hitters that aren't going to hit that stuff. So I don't see the baseness in that.
You can call me a homer. You can call me whatever you want. But Joe Doyle is from the state of Washington, has no affiliation whatsoever to LSU, nor I would imagine does he care if LSU is good or bad in baseball. He just loves baseball and scouts players. And I asked him his opinion on those guys, and he basically laughed at all of you who suggest you shouldn't take them seriously because they play at a small school. I can give you examples. I can say it 1,000 ways, but sometimes it means more when you hear it from someone who's not affiliated with LSU or covers LSU on a daily basis. Hopefully that helps as sort of like a bucket of cold water on some of your heads who desperately need it. Okay, now on to more business. Daniel Dickinson, the Utah Valley infielder that LSU got committed on Tuesday. Dickinson is from Washington, same as Joe Doyle. And Doyle has seen Dickinson play since his days in Richland High School, high school in Richland, Washington. So I asked Joe Doyle why he's so high on Daniel Dickinson heading to LSU.
I watched the kid just rake as a high school junior. I mean, he beat up on everybody, but he was undersized. He wasn't physical. He got to Utah Valley, and he really just blossomed and grew into what scouts would call his adult, mature, athletic frame. and he hasn't stopped. He just hits and hits and hits, and he's started to develop some muscle and some loft. And now all of a sudden, you're talking about a kid that can run and play a little bit of defense and hit for some power too. I mean, he does really remind me of the type of skill set that Alex Bregman had at LSU, with a little bit more loft in his swing, a little bit more game power. But from what I've seen, he should be the leadoff hitter for LSU, or hitting in the 2-hole right away.
Leadoff hitter, 2-hole right away. I followed up by asking, is he a day one starter? I said, absolutely day one starter. So Daniel Dickinson will fit in somewhere on that LSU infield, second, third, or short, as a day one starter. Jay Johnson and the staff right now are doing work, scouring the country to find the best talent, and they're bringing them to Baton Rouge. Oh, ye of little faith. Now, what about a couple of Tigers who are eyeing this weekend's draft and next week's draft? Bear Jones and Griffin Herring are the two guys that we talk most about. Like, we all know Tommy White and Thatcher Hurd and Gage Jump and Fidel Ulloa. Like, they're all getting drafted. They're all signing. We know that. But what about Bear Jones and Griffin Herring? Those are two draft-eligible sophomores. And for the most part, the feeling has been Herring probably comes back with an opportunity to be a weekend starter. And Bear Jones, because he's a power hitter from the right side, who's really only going to play first base or DH, probably has hit his ceiling for what he can be as far as a draftable prospect at the next level. So Jones probably gets $800K and signs. That's been the general feeling. Oh, Joe Doyle disagreed. First, Joe Doyle on Bear Jones.
I tend to think he's going to be going back to school. Generally, the right first baseman with power as the big carrying tool. It's not the sexiest profile in any given draft. It's I don't want to call him a one tool, like a one trick pony, but it is power over just about every other tool. Right now, I've got a sixth, seventh round grade on him. And if that's the case, we're talking about, $250,000, $300,000 signing bonus. I think there's enough NIL money out there in college baseball to where that's going to be a tough decision for him to make. So, and that's assuming that he goes in the 6th or 7th round. So I would call it a better chance than not that he stays in Baton Rouge.
Let's point out something obvious here. So Joe Doyle is saying that Jones is around 6 or 7 guy that gets $250K. I have firsthand spoken to scouts that believe Bear Jones is a round 3, top 100 type prospect that's going to get $750 to $800K. And if that's the case, he probably signs. Where does that land? That's a big gap. It's a big gap, y'all. So at what point in the draft does Bear Jones's phone ring? What is the offer? Will he take it? But there you have a very reputable scout saying he's got Jones as around 6 or 7 guy, and that changes things dramatically. And if Bear Jones and his 28 homers bring their little booty on back to Baton Rouge, all of a sudden that lineup got devastating if you stick Bear Jones in the middle of it with Daniel Dickinson in one of the top 2 holes. What about Griffin Herring? This was the other piece of that, which was surprising, because the general thought has been Griffin Herring is going to come back and try to be a weekend starter to increase his draft stock, because there's a ceiling of what a reliever can make in the draft. Here was Joe Doyle and Griffin Herring.
A month ago, I would have said, I think there's a pretty good chance he goes back to LSU. He's going to be a weekend guy. They're looking for arms. I look at it now, the pitching staff continues to grow as we speak today. You have Jacob Myers, you have Devin Sheeran, you have some of these guys that are coming back that are going to be pitching big innings. Zach Cowan is a really, really good get for large inning loads. I don't know if Griffin Herring is like a shoe-in Saturday or Sunday starter anymore, and for that reason, he might be encouraged to go pro. I do think Griffin Herring is going to get offered something to the tune of $500,000 or $600,000 to go in the 4th or 5th round. So I would imagine that he goes pro.
500 to 600 would be the top end of what a reliever gets. And it is worth noting that Griffin Herring this summer in the Cape has had the opportunity to start. Has that made an impression on scouts? I don't know, but we'll see. Again, the first round of the draft is on Sunday. The draft continues into Monday and then wraps up on Tuesday. By the time the draft wraps on Tuesday afternoon, we will have a much better sense of what LSU's 2025 roster is going to look like. But great news for LSU so far this week and overall in the transfer portal. Okay, speaking of the transfer portal, 24/7 Sports rated their impact transfer portal players for college football in 2024. You might be surprised who they listed for LSU. We'll get to that next as we wrap up Locked on LSU, your team every day. I've been pretty adamant that I think Jordan Gilbert is LSU's most important transfer. I think there are more interesting transfers. I think C.J. Daniels, 1,000-yard receiver at Liberty, or Xavier Thomas, who might be a returner. Those would be big impact guys. I certainly think Jair Brown could end up being a starting cornerback coming in from Ohio State, and that would really be impactful. But I keep circling Jordan Gilbert because I know how important the safety spot is in Blake Baker's defense. And, last year at safety, LSU was bad. Andre Sam physically wasn't an SEC safety. And on top of that, man, you had coverage busts and you had a general lack of athleticism. Major Burns this year playing that star role is a much better fit than at safety. I want Major Burns in the box as a physical guy, maybe helping with the run, not turning and covering and being a last line of defense. Jordan Gilbert's played a ton of football in the SEC as a starter. He's physically ready. I think he's important. But the guy that 24/7 Sports mentioned as the most impactful portal player for LSU, the one to keep an eye on, is Gio Paez out of Wisconsin. And it's for one pretty obvious reason. I mean, LSU's desperate for production on the interior of the defensive line. It's something we've talked a lot about. I don't need to rehash that. But I've said this once before. I've said this multiple times, actually, and you're probably going to hear me repeat it again before and during the start of this football season. Gio Paez, I had a chance to interview him twice now. And the first time after he committed, he said something that immediately reminded me of Joe Burrow. I want to be clear. I'm not saying he's Joe Burrow. I'm not saying he's going to win the Heisman or be a first-round pick or any of that sort of stuff. But it's a mentality. When Joe Burrow came on his visit to LSU, when he had left Ohio State after that spring, he came to LSU and he was not interested in any way in any of the recruiting hoopla. He didn't put on the uniform. He didn't do the photo shoot. He didn't want to go into Tiger Stadium with his name on the video board. He didn't care about the big fancy dinner or any of that stuff. All Joe Burrow wanted was to talk ball and to see how he fit, because all he cared about was maximizing his college career and going to the NFL. Ultimately, that's what landed him in Baton Rouge, and we know the rest of the story. Gio Paez said something similar to me. That when he came on his visit, he didn't put on the uniform. He didn't do the photo shoot. He wasn't interested in any of that. He knew what he wanted. And a guy that's been a 3-4 defensive end throughout his career at Wisconsin, where ends in a 3-4 are essentially space eaters. You eat up double teams to allow speedy linebackers to stretch the field and make plays. And Paez knew, I need to go play in a 4-3 where I can put my hand in the dirt and blow things up and make plays on the interior. So he told me he was not considering any defense that ran a 3-4. He was only going to play in a 4-3 where he could play interior defensive line because he needed to start making plays, not just eating space. And when you have a guy that knows implicitly what they want, a guy that's entering his 6th collegiate season, a guy that's 23 years old, you're talking about a guy that is both physically and emotionally mature, a guy that's not interested in putting hats on a table, that's not interested in doing a photo shoot and putting out a tweet or any of that stuff, a guy that is solely interested in becoming the best football player he can be. And he's only got 1 year to do it because this is it for college eligibility. And he's got to put on a show for the NFL to prove he deserves an opportunity at the next level. That impressed me tremendously about Gio Paez. Now, look, he doesn't have the skins on the wall. There's no denying that. There's no argument even to the contrary. Gio Paez in his career at Wisconsin played in a lot of games. He redshirted back in 2019. In 2020, played in just one game. That was in the COVID year. So by the time he got to his 3rd season in college, he'd played in one career game. In 2021, he played in 9 games, had just 2 tackles. So 2022, his 4th year in college, ends up playing in 10 games with just 12 tackles. The role of a 3-4 end. You're just a space eater. And then this past year, played in all 13 games, started 6 times, made just 22 tackles. Gio Paez has played in a lot of games, has not made a huge impact in those games, at least not statistically, but knows this is his opportunity. This is the time now for Gio Paez to make a name for himself. And there are reps to be had at LSU. Gio Paez was not at LSU for spring football. And we got to see some guys like Jacobian Tank Guillory kind of become the leader of that group. You know, you've got JVR Suggs coming in. Kimo Makanayoli flipped from offense to defense. You know, you've got a 5-star in Dominic Williams coming in. Preston Hickey is a guy that transferred in from Oklahoma State. Sean Washington's a JUCO guy who started his career at Georgia. You got a lot of bodies. You don't have a lot of skins on the wall, which means there's nothing given and there's a lot of reps to be had. And there are far worse places that you could place your bets than on a 23-year-old that's both physically and emotionally mature that has urgency. And Gio Paez checks all of those boxes. I still think Jordan Gilbert is the most important, most impactful transfer that LSU signed this year. But Gio Paez, if you're looking for a sleeper, that's a good place to start. We are counting down to the start of the college football season and fired up to do so. And we'll be here every single day, every step of the way. It is Locked on LSU. Please subscribe on your favorite podcast app. Rate us, leave a review. Let a friend know if they love the Tigers. We're here every single weekday for Locked on LSU. And, of course, thanks to everybody watching on YouTube. Please smash that like button and subscribe on the YouTube channel. Until next time, it is Locked on LSU, your team every day.